One day in Nauvoo, Joseph's actions described perfectly how the atonement works. Justice has to be satisfied. Through the atonement, mercy is extended to satisfy the demands of justice. Let me tell you, Joseph had a lot of responsibilities in Nauvoo, and for a time he acted as judge. Well, they held court in the courthouse, but today, if you go to Nauvoo, it's the 3-story white building that the missionaries referred to as the Cultural Hall. So they're at this courthouse. Judge Smith is presiding over the court proceedings, and a man by the name of Anthony is brought in. Anthony is accused of stealing money. The evidence is against him, and in fact, Anthony even admitted his guilt. Anthony, it's important to understand, is an African-American man. He stole the money because he was trying to purchase the freedom of his son, who was a slave out of state. And with money available to purchase his son's freedom, that son and Anthony could be reunited in Nauvoo. None of us will ever understand and comprehend the agony of that father and what he was trying to do in purchasing his son's freedom. But stealing money was against the law, and Judge Smith found him guilty because of the evidence and because of Anthony's own testimony, guilty of stealing the money. Now, the punishment for stealing money was not only to repay the money, but also to pay a fine. So Anthony, heartbroken, no doubt, not only gave the money back, but also had to pay a fine. So he's even further behind in purchasing his son's freedom. Completely distraught and heartbroken, no doubt, Anthony left the courthouse that day. He didn't get very far down the road when Judge Smith came out and called after him. Anthony, he calls. Anthony, of course, didn't want to speak to Joseph at this time. Joseph calls again. Anthony, come over here. I want to talk to you. Anthony turned around and came over to the prophet. Joseph reminded him of what just took place in court and why it took place. He said, Anthony, stealing the money was wrong and you know it. That's against the law. As judge, I had no option but to administer justice, and that is to have you pay back the money and impose a fine upon you. He then paused for a moment, Joseph did. And he looks at Anthony and he says, Anthony, do you see that horse over there? That horse is a fine animal. Take her to town, sell the horse, use the money to pay the fine, and use the remaining money to purchase your son's freedom. Anthony, completely overjoyed at this point, throws his arms around the prophet and they both weep. When they both finally compose themselves, Joseph looks at Anthony and he smiles at him. And he says, Anthony, either you or I have a problem, because that horse belongs to Emma and she loves that animal. Now, we don't know the rest of the story, but knowing enough about Emma, no doubt she agreed with Joseph and gladly gave up that horse so that Anthony could purchase his son's freedom and they could be reunited as father and son in Nauvoo. A perfect example of not only how mercy satisfies the demands of justice, but it provides even more. It provides more mercy than sometimes we even expect and pray for.
For more videos about our church history, make sure to subscribe.